listening to Adventure Party for the 4th week of March 2024. This week, we have a difficulty 15 topic. Will the party's podcasting skills be enough to take on the challenge? The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and related gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I am your incredibly high-level end boss, Warlord Scarr.
I'm Liam.
And as ever, final boss time. I'm Savage Mike. Let's go.
Liam volunteering for the kobold position here.
I couldn't think of anything witty or clever to say, so
I don't think anything we just said was witty or clever. Let's just get that on the record.
just went with Bob the Fighter, you know. I'm Liam.
Hits people with sword for money.
Well, apparently, I don't know if you guys saw all the stats that were released in the not too distant past there. Someone did an analysis on all the Baldur's Gate, and Bob the Fighter is pretty popular.
As per traditional D&D, yeah. Actually, now that I think of it, I think my guy's a fighter. Can I cast spells? I can't remember. I think I might have picked it. But I have a very, very messed up Baldur's Gate save at the moment. I don't think it's recoverable. I'm just going to forge on. I made some horrible choices early on, and I am learning that you're going to have ample opportunity to regret those over the course of 80 odd hours, as of course the challenge rating ramps up.
Look, it could be worse. He could get the bad ending because he didn't have a snowball fight.
Okay, spoilers. How long's it been out now? Scarr, our bi-monthly check on how long Baldur's Gate 3 has been out and how long since then. Savage Mix still hasn't finished it.
Well, mine was a Witcher 3 reference. The Witcher 3 has been out for how long? I don't know.
Is there a snowball fight in Witcher 3? Maybe there is.
Oh, at one point you can have a snowball fight with Ciri, and that's one of the key decision points on whether you get to go to
really?
bed. Yeah.
I'd take every opportunity to have a snowball fight. So I'm pretty sure I didn't miss that. I'm still traumatized by the kind of decision point around whether or not to put the baby in the oven. But that's another story for another time. Sometimes you can't really rate every challenge. But for the ones you can, we need a system of rating, which is what we're going to talk about, right? Our dance around.
So yes, we're here to discuss a phenomenon which is relatively new. Well, okay, I say that, and then I remember, I'm an old man. 3rd edition was 20 years ago, people. You've aged out. There are people who were born after 3rd and 3.5 came out who are now gaming in 5th edition. But those people are now experiencing a phenomenon that 3rd Ed innovated, which is, well, okay. It innovated the D&D space, and we can get to, if there similar things happened in other games.
Before 3rd Ed, you didn't really have challenge rating. You could kind of figure stuff out by looking at, okay, well, what level are my guys at? What XP do I expect out of an encounter? And therefore I add up the XP, and that should give them a fight.
Yeah, you generally aim for, say, the average bad guy would have the same number of hit dice as the players had average levels, because it's before everyone had the same level. And then you'd give extra XP if they had special abilities. I remember there was, you'd see in the monster manual something like, this monster has 6 hit dice plus 3 hit points and 3 stars on it because he can turn people to stone and is immune to lightning bolts or whatever. This was how you totted up XP for him, and then you judge based on that. But it wasn't a convenient. You could guesstimate based on looking at its hit dice, but that was at best, and we're going to be using this a lot. A rule of thumb.
And certainly the XP one fell down. I know you're talking about hit dice and to hit and stuff, but the XP one also kind of fell down, and it didn't exist in the earlier ones as well when the XP was based on treasure. Because, there were plenty of very dangerous monsters that had no treasure at all.
Yeah. And then that's sort of like we go on and on about people's mentality of what monsters were for. But yeah, by 2nd edition, the internalized logic was that, monsters were your source of XP. And you'd guesstimate how much a monster was worth by, looking at, you'd guess based on its hit dice and what crazy powers it has. But there wasn't a nice, convenient look-up table that you could really use to. Unless maybe there's one inside that giant monsters companion that came in three binders that listed. And I don't think that wouldn't have been workable with that more. But anyway, point is there wasn't a particularly convenient way of saying this is appropriate monster. So in Third Ed, the designers of monsters start conveniently gifting that as a option by including a number called a challenge rating for each monster. And this was a mostly accurate estimate of, given your average party at this level, will this monster be a decent fight? Will it last a couple of rounds? Will it get its licks in?
I think it's also it's kind of at your level should consume about 20% of your party's resources, and that being healing spells, daily uses, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that was the heuristic that they used because they had presumed a system of the characters would have about 4 fights a day, and then they would break off the rest. And you could vary it up by saying, okay, they had a math system for if you have X number of lower chance rated creatures, it counts as a certain encounter level, or you could once every 10 fights you could have a much higher level boss monster as a treat. And there was a whole bunch of advice and such in the book. Possibly more that people use, because I think a lot of GMs may just default to pick appropriate level monster, throw at players.
I know certainly anytime I've run stuff off my own back in 3.5 Pathfinder and a little bit in 5th Ed, I've used challenge rating a lot. It's also kind of useful because the assumption of 20% kind of is with your average party. If you've got a fairly combat optimized party, you could probably go CR+1 on most things. If you want to go CR+2, you'd want to have a damn good group, and it's going to be a damn tough fight. I guess the big pitfall that you have in it is, though, it's not always going to be. Look, I guess to me, it's more to pull the pirate code thing. It's more of a set of guidelines.
Yeah, and I think that is in fact one of the big elements of the challenge rating system, is that it's not really a system. It has always functioned best as guidelines, but I've always got the impression that people wanted a system, or at least the vocal outcry from 1,000 GMs saying, "Oh no, I made an appropriate level encounter for a party and it killed my players. What's going on?"
Well, Bucko, people often want things that aren't any good. The audience is not. What does it say? Customers always right in matters of taste. We tend to clip that laugh bit off, but it's like the challenge rating system, as far as I can tell, is something that's already slapped on top of a pretty, like, if you go back to Gygax's original maths for advancement and XP and things like that, which included, by the way, how much you can haul out of the dungeon. Like, that was a factor. Logistics were in play. It's largely been thrown aside. I mean, once you decoupled XP gain from level gain per class, then you'd kind of taken that train off the rails anyways, and trying to build out the track in front of a runaway locomotive with the CR system, I don't think they should have just put it back on the tracks and maybe broken it gently to GMs and players like that. You're going to have to do some math here, buddy. It's going to be slightly more complicated than adding. Liam?
I guess it for me, it comes down to no two parties are going to take an encounter the same. So if you take an encounter which is, okay, well, what have we got? We got a rogue, we got a fighter, we got a ranger who focuses on 2-weapon fighting and maybe a battle cleric. Okay, cool. And now predominantly we're sending, a flying monster or flying monsters at somebody at the party. They're going to have a tough time. But if you switch that around and you have a ranger who focuses on range combat on the bow build out, this would be on 3.5, suddenly that encounter's a lot easier.
Yeah.
The same, how did you stack the terrain?
Yeah, the circumstantial stuff is a huge factor.
We've got a bullet rushing monster and a great big bloody cliff.
Yeah. Some Baldur's Gate 3 again? Or not Baldur's Gate, and party composition is kind of meant to account for all of that. You're supposed to be able to throw a mix of stuff at a party because they are a mix of stuff that is prepared for, to various degrees, a bit of everything.
You throw ghouls at a party that all have their good save as fort, and then you throw it at a mixed group or a party who all have poor fort save.
Exactly. It's a completely different on a flat plane with clear sight lines in every direction. So even just take away terrain. But once you start putting terrain back in, then it all becomes relevant again. Who's got the high ground?
Yeah, I've lost track of the times I've heard stories of, oh, whenever I put a dragon in front of my players, they decimated in 2 rounds. But then I put 3 kobolds on top of a cliff with bows and arrows, and they killed 5 of my players or PCs.
Which would indicate the challenge rating system is sort of like it's sort of solve for a perfectly spherical beholder in a featureless dungeon. It is an idealized bit of soft math that gives people a sense that they're in control when at the point of time where they're hyperventilating over whether their encounter is balanced or not. Guess what? While you're running the encounter, you're in control of what happens. And if it's going poorly for your players, you can, nudge one of those high ground kobolds into a Wilhelm scream situation.
Grumble, grumble, grumble.
Yeah, GM Fiat is a thing. Get over it. If the CR rating math isn't working out.
Are we playing on hard mode here? Are we hand holding our players like?
Well, only if it's what do you want to happen? The game to happen, or hey, kill players by all means. Kill them stone dead.
Kill their characters. Their character.
Nah, we'll see. But pre-recording, of course, it did come up that challenge rating is really only a thing for certain kinds of D&D and D&D adjacent systems.
I mean, where you've got things with defined static levels, it's a lot easier to do. Like, so I'm pretty late into running the enemy within, and that the players, right, I went through the starter set box set before we started, so I don't even know how much XP my group have at this stage, but they're akin to the high level NPCs and could probably go toe to toe with a greater demon at this point.
They're having fun though, right?
They're having fun, yeah. The combat's probably a little bit dull for me, and it's very much a case of rocket tag,
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, this is it. I mean,
Warframe doesn't have challenge rating, is what I'm saying. That's what we're getting at.
it doesn't, no, and it doesn't seem to be suffering too much, but it also runs into some of the age-old problems because that's just a limitation system.
Yeah, you could probably come up with a bit of a list, though. It's like, okay, right, well, if I take the meatiest PC in my group, okay, well, is this guy's to hit on a par with that? Okay, is it better than that? Well, if it's better than that, it's probably could be a tough enough fight. If it's worse than that, maybe not, particularly if they're outnumbered. Maybe you want to throw in some extra guys to balance things out, because Warframe does have an outnumbering mechanic. Or you make sure that they've got the talents that mean that they don't care about being outnumbered. If somebody has less than 20 of your players to hit, there's no point. It's literally throwing a low level kobold. All you're going to do is stick something in there that the players can get the advantage train going on to get the steamroller to annihilate everything.
Yeah.
You want a bag of kobolds.
You don't. You really don't. Well, look, overwhelming numbers can work on Warframe, because unless you've got very certain talents, being shot with an arrow still hurts. Most people can't dodge them, particularly when you're outside of a certain range. Now, if they've got enough armor, you're probably going to take 1 hit point off them. Whoop-de-doo. In general, and mass numbers will still work, and you can go for the owl. We outnumber you 4-1. We get plus 40 to hit.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, for Warframe, like, did it say all that stuff in the core rulebook as
God, no.
you have advice? No, you had to find that out through, 3-4 years of campaigning?
If you look online, there's people will certainly you will find that advice. It's common enough that people will discuss that kind of thing. But yeah, true play, you'd probably discover yourself that straight out the gate, the early books, they're probably stat wise are okay. I think around book 5, they've made some of the NPCs a bit meatier. Some of them can actually go toe to toe with the players a little bit. They probably need a little bit of tweaking, but not much. But around book 3, certainly, I don't think they were putting too much rigor into the stats of the bad guys. And it was like, man, if I don't boost this guy up, he's getting cakewalked. But that's even just taking a pre-written encounter. And generally, when you take a pre-written encounter, and you would assume that for book 3, that for a group that has the XP for playing through to book 3, you'd get it. But Warframe was a bit weird because you get XP just for playing. So if your players drag the arse out of every game, they'll have a lot more XP than if they were very, very efficient at running through every game.
We look in all the nooks and crannies for our XP. We're leaving no side quest unturned or unviolated. Sometimes, like, what's the worst way we can fulfill the conditions of this side quest? One of the beauties of role playing.
Hey, look, if your players are having fun, that's really all that matters. I know for me, the one fix I made with that is at a certain point we decided, look, guys, I'm going to half the session XP. All the story XP stuff, I'm going to keep giving you guys all that stuff. But the actual chapter XP, the actual like per session XP, I'm going to drop in half.
That's possibly another episode. In the
absolutely. But in terms of CR, yes, it doesn't exist in a lot of systems,
and it doesn't work in the ones it does exist in.
No, look, I think that's a little unfair. I think it does work. It's just remember that they're guidelines, not hard rules.
Fair enough. I suppose I'd spend the space, instead of rattling off how all these pretend numbers can be modified based on the number of players in the party. You'd either need a much more complicated system that takes account of things like class and then assigns kind of letter codes to the different monsters or the different monster types, indicating that, well, these are more difficult if you don't have ranged weaponry or things like that. Why are you going adventuring? No bow. What's wrong with you?
I'm optimized for greatsword.
I suppose you could talk more about how to select opponents for interesting encounters.
Well, I got something to say before we move on to something with that. I do think that CR has been a bit more refined as we moved into 5th Ed D&D and as we moved into Pathfinder 2nd Ed. I think that's also by virtue of the numbers being a lot tighter. If you look at 3rd Ed 3.5, Pathfinder 1st Ed, the difference between having a character who is kitted out with the best stats, kitted out with the best gear, has the right feat choices, you're talking about like a +4, plus maybe even a +5 to hit. When you get up a few levels, like you get up to the mid-level range, you get up to into your teens, +5 to hit, like that's bonkers that you might have that difference. So if you're trying to factor that into a challenge rating system, that's nearly impossible. 5th Ed and in Pathfinder 2nd edition, the difference between a well-built player and a poorly built player, you might be talking about a +2.
Yeah, a survivable amount. It'll be noticeable, but it's not going to necessarily always prevent someone from completing a certain piece of content.
If they're not following the golden rule of you get that striking weapon as quickly as you can in Pathfinder 2nd Ed, okay, they might struggle a little bit, but like it's the differences aren't as extreme. So I think the challenge rating system probably works a little bit better now. At least that's my feeling. I don't know if you guys have run much 5th Ed or 2nd Ed Pathfinder.
I suppose the question is, did they kind of pull all the math in a bit tighter to accommodate, to make it easier to use the challenge rating system? Or did they get, I don't think they made any major tweaks to the challenge rating system as such. They're assigned in a kind of an arbitrary way.
Monsters are done in an arbitrary way. Monsters don't have any mechanics or anything. They do. They've got a set of, like, 5th Ed has a set of guidelines, and so does 2nd Ed on like how you make a monster and how you figure out how tough it is. Like,
I think I've seen people use those rules to like go back and find out that a lot of the monsters did not that are actually in the 5th edition monster manual do not particularly well align.
oh yeah, look, don't expect 5th Ed to be eternally consistent.
No, and they are. This is the thing. My concern is that my worry here is that, like, okay, man, we got to fix the maths so the challenge rating works. Is the cart before the horse? Really, and I've seen, like, Duragar, for example, Grey Dwarf, kind of the dark dwarves or whatever they're called. They're CR1, like so many things you'll encounter early on. But my goodness, they've got some annoying abilities. The ability for anything to turn invisible is instantly going to change the texture of an encounter, and what you can't see, you can't hit, and if you can't hit it, you're gonna get sucker punched quite a bit.
Fairy Fire is a first level spell, isn't it?
Very fine. Yeah, if you've bothered to bring it, I mean, if you know you're encountering the damn things, fine. But if they happen to pop out of a hole somewhere, then they can be troublesome. Ghosts are the other, or what is it, first level CR1 specters, because they can just go incorporeal, and that there's not a lot of ways to deal with that. So these are CR1 monsters that can actually, if played to the hilt by a GM who doesn't feel like giving you any hand holding today, can.
Why are we finding all of this holy water?
Let's start drinking it now. But they are interesting and well-known monsters because they have these abilities that throw them outside the curve. And I would be very resistant to any solution to the problem of CR that suggested that instead you kind of made these rigid templates with which to build monsters so that you could calculate their difficulty by kind of shearing off all the knobbly weird stuff that makes monsters interesting in the first place. The worry about CR is actually misplaced. What you should be worrying about is, are you equipped with enough tools to put together interesting encounters, regardless of what any sort of arbitrary maths is? Maybe you need some guidelines, sure, but are you going into the book totting numbers? If you're going into the book and trying to reduce everything to a simple formula where you can go, oh, party's that level, I'll use these monsters because it adds up in this single vector, then I get news for you. You're probably not creating good encounters. You're probably creating very boring, very weird mixes of stuff that has no bearing on tone or the hell, even the plot of your campaign. If you're fighting unicorns and lizard men, like why are the unicorns and lizard men allied against you? What's the reasoning? It doesn't matter that the maths adds up, especially if the lizard men are just kind of humans with rubber masks on, and the unicorn is just horse stats with a horn attack.
Depends on your party. I mean, my party are wargamers with a thin veneer of role playing.
Yeah, look, that's that's somebody's good time, and I've played plenty of it.
But there is also some scope in the challenge rating system, right? So they have always made sure that dragons will always be a tough fight, and you know how they do that? Your CR15 dragon should actually be CR17. They've always under CR dragons, deliberately so.
Well, if we're just going to keep fudging the numbers, we might as well just
if you're not aware of that.
Yeah, if you're saying, oh, I need a 15th level monster for this random encounter, it'll probably be fine. I know my players are level 15, but the occasional level, my players are level 13, but the occasional level 15 random encounter will shake things up. Oh no, they're all dead. That campaign's over now. My players will never play again.
Well, the danger is as well is like that. The random encounter with a dragon is one thing, but then also CR15. My guys usually cakewalk a CR15 encounter, so I better make this CR16 or 17 by banging on a bunch of sorcerer levels or by throwing in some extra monsters for support. And then you turned your CR15 encounter into a CR18 encounter or a CR19 encounter. Your party got wiped.
I think one of the issues here is mainly, again, like a lot of these things, is psychological. GMs want a system that will A, challenge their players, but B, not end their campaigns. Or alternatively, if you're more cynical about it, something that they can blame if their campaign gets totaled by some bad choices in monster selection. And I can understand the desire. Like, as a third ed baby,
You're an old man at the start of this episode. What happened?
as I said, third ed baby, but the baby boomers are dying, so time marches on.
Okay. Anyways, you were saying.
Let's say I understand the desire for a system that will let you throw together what looks like an appropriate encounter. But as I've matured. That sounds so pretentious.
Like a fine wine.
As I've gone through many's a system, and like particularly for me, Savage Worlds is a system I come back to a lot, and that has just about has some advice on monster design and monster choice, but it is very much a system that will allow a GM to throw, monsters that literally cannot be killed except by vampire and silver bullets. Vampire silver bullets. Anyway, well, how do you get the vampire silver? That's an interesting challenge. What I'm saying is, as I've gotten, I've realized that like you as a GM have to take responsibility for what happens, and sometimes you do it like me by like lowballing encounters or letting players get away with tricks to outsmart the guys with with machine guns pointed at them. Sometimes you accept that the tank takes no damage and the scientist character loses all their legs. You can't make a system that is going to wash a GM's hands of the responsibility of keeping their campaign together. You can give them guidelines, and it is a desirable thing to do so. And you should ideally, in your main rulebook, you should have enough guidelines that they probably don't need to go to the internet for an explanation as to why all of their boss monsters have died in 3 seconds, yet the kobolds continue to take a toll on their players from random ambushes. That kind of stuff should be explained, made explicit in the rulebook, and the GM should have seen this advice as they were reading the rulebook, assuming they read the rulebook. But a system that is not going to create ideal outcomes without GM input, but it can certainly help to, arm the GM with tools, but no, as you say, the craftsman can't blame the tools, assuming they pick the right system.
Like that's for your game, like Savage Worlds, which like the main focus of Savage Worlds is in combat, but certainly historically D&D, the pillars of it are exploration and combat. And with 3.5 and Pathfinder, and probably more so Pathfinder 2nd Ed than Pathfinder 5e, the pillars are still exploration and combat. The fact that combat is such a big focus of it, I think you need to have a system like CR to kind of codify it. Because the alternative is, you've got 2 alternatives really. One is that you just kind of eyeball it and guess. And the second is, if you had all the time in the world, you just wargame it out either in your head or with VTT or with the sheets in front of you and just kind of assuming average rolls, how's this going to play out? I don't know. I know I don't have time for that.
And as I say, we do live in the age of the internet where you will find some weird obsessive who has done it for you if you look hard enough.
Like, this is a potential thing that could come out with kind of the next iteration of the VTTs. Like, could you have some automation in it where you can proof check your encounter?
Oh, sort of run it simulation style. That's a very interesting idea. I mean, there's Kobold Fight Club and there's WotC's own D&D Beyond encounter calculator. Then, of course, there's people like Sly Flourish and Matt Colville who've taken their own broad stabs at refining the CR system. But yeah, once you've got all of this stuff in the big number box, you could, as you say, just run it in sim a couple of thousand times. Or, just to be topical, get an AI to do it. Ask ChatGPT to play it out. I suppose that's the thing I've kind of started arguing towards, that you have a more refined system that takes account of terrain and special abilities and party composition, not just size. I mean, that would probably potentially help you avoid the ridiculous waffle stomps or party wipes. Yeah, somebody get on that. I mean, it's probably a lot of work. I'm going to imagine it's a lot of work.
How do you program your AI to make dumb choices?
Yeah,
Player makes that choice that you're like, oh.
I don't know. That's an interesting question. Maybe get them to roll some dice.
Are you sure you want to do that? Gotta go in to get a flank of the gelatinous cube.
Oh, okay. The worst future possible version of this is the Clippy, sort of looking over your shoulder as you roleplay on the VTT, going, that's a suboptimal move for your build. I mean, you sure you want to do that? Which, I mean, would also kind of come out of this simulation approach. My goodness, what are we like? We're trying to pre-game the game of the imaginary fight. Okay, CR, final thoughts.
I'm just looking at ways of making it both challenging but fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate what you're saying. There is something inherently unsatisfying if you ever peer behind the curtain and discover that the GM's just kind of wanging on the difficulty slider depending on how things are going. yeah, you'd prefer that you get out of it by the skin of your teeth in an interesting way. Usually, by some combination of resource utilization and being a bit canny about how you tackle any fight in terms of what's around you and what you can make use of. Right. So where do we end up on CR, on challenge ratings in systems? Good, bad, and different. Needs more work.
For me, I think they're a useful tool. I think they've gotten better over time, and I think you just need to be aware that they're not perfect. You still need to throw in considerations like a party composition and terrain.
I would say something similar. I do appreciate having that sort of benchmark there, even if it is not entirely accurate or free from pro dragon bias. Ultimately, what you're trying to put into your game is what a GM needs to run the game as intended. And that could be advice, and that could be mechanical systems, but you should have something there. And if you're running into a problem of players, don't dress up what is basically just fancy advice with, and try to pretend it's a system just to, try to make I need an objective system or my GM is just making up. I don't think that's, that productive. I think have advice, have systems, have both. But ultimately, you as a game designer are passing the buck to the GM, and the GM has to take that responsibility and arm them for that. But
Didn't really talk about how it factors into published stuff where you don't have the fine levers. You are kind of winging. You're kind of working with someone else's notes, but we'll leave that for another time. Good advice on this. Slyfirsh, as mentioned, has a pretty good kind of 2-point rule of thumb that I'll encourage you to go and seek. You can find it on slyflourish.com under Lazy Encounter Benchmark. If you have a copy to hand, Flea Mortals, released by, was it MCDM, Matt Koval, Dungeon Master, whatever. He has pretty comprehensive refinement of CR and the CR system in the Flea Mortals book. But I'd say in his case, they've attacked the problem from two ends, because the Flea Mortals book, the real gold in there is the way that they've completely reworked lots and lots of standard monsters to give you, as a GM, more options and more interesting things to do on the battlefield. So, but it has a complete CR budget kind of calculator as well, kind of more catered to party size and level, rather than the slightly simpler version that's presented in the DMG.
Well, that is always going to be a bit of a bound for it, really, isn't it? It's you can only make a system like that so complex.
Yeah, how much time do you want to put in? It's still usable. It's still, and it has good examples, and it has
weirdos like myself and maybe fellow host Owen, either one, would probably relish a very numerically complex system, but would be at limited use to the general public.
Yeah, I'm sort of like, unless it's really, really good, which requires it to be really complicated, then don't bother me at all.
Considered adding logarithms into this system.
I got to go get my sine tables.
Benefit from an exponential number of CR1 monsters in our high-level game.
Someone's breaking the maths again. Right, folks, you can find us on our Discord. I believe occasionally stuff appears on Facebook and Twitter, but if you really want to tell us how challenging your rating should be, come and find us on Discord. There should be a link in the show notes or elsewhere. We are the Adventuring Party, but for now, this party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.
Alright. Haven't ended one in a while, just occurred to me. But that was pretty good. Almost CR rate. So, We should play a little game now. This is for the after credits part. CR rating of a camel. Anyone want to guess?
Oh, what game? Fifth Ed?
It's in fifth ed, yeah.
Oh,
I'm gonna
it's gotta be similar
say
to a horse. I'm gonna say 1.
2.
Oh, if camel's dangerous in your world, the camels are really dangerous. CR rating of a camel, presumably because it doesn't have any particular abilities apart from spitting, is a half. Let's see. Find something a little more D&D flavored. CR rating of a ghost.
I actually think it's
Again,
12.
Fifth Ed, is it?
Yep, fifth ed ghost.
You said 1, but that has to be wrong.
No, I think it's something like 4.
It is wrong. A spectre is 1, but
Yeah.
a bog standard ghost is indeed 4.
Yeah.
They're quite deadly.
Yeah, because they're the last thing that has that weird aging thing.
Yes, they can do life drain stuff on you.
Stuff that elves are like, whatever. And everybody else is like,
And possession, which is probably the thing that makes them really dangerous. They grab someone's, they test against a charisma save and then possess you. So I guess your fighter who hits people with sword for money
Probably
is
doesn't
now
have
your
great
biggest
charisma.
problem. No, and is now the party's problem. Until they can shake it off. What about, let's see, one more. This turned out to not be a great game after all. It's a giant, actually. Let's put giant in and see what.
Kind of
Hill
giant.
giant. Hill giant.
Hill Giants. 6.
CR rating for a hill
I'm going
giant.
to say 7.
CR rating is lost it. Oh, there it is. It's 5.
Huh.
So who was closest without going over?
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Oh, would have gone over neither of us. We both.
Oh, no, who's closest then? There you go, 5. Despite the fact that, and weirdly, they don't really get anything. They can throw a rock, and they can make 2 attacks, but they're more challenging than Ghost. I don't think so. I mean, it's a lot of hit points, but I'm going to say Ghosts are going to give you a much harder time. Even a single Ghost will give you a much harder time than a single hill
really
giant.
depends on your group. You
But
know,
if you're,
you got
but all you got to
heavy
deal
hitters
with
in your party, you're gonna mince through. You're gonna mince through a hill joint.
Sure.
You've got
doesn't matter
a
how hard they
cleric
can hit if they
and
can't get the Ghost.
you got a cleric and a wizard in your party. That ghost is not much of a problem.
What would they do to it?
Lasers? Like, not. Oh, wait.
Magic missile, baby.
Yeah, it's armor class 11.
Don't care about
45 hit
your
points.
don't care about your shenanigans with your incorporealness. Like cast magic missile.
Visible, ethereal. Yeah. Does magic missile hit the withering touch? Spicy. Yeah, pretty bad. Pluses to hit. Right. Boring game, anyways. Better off playing D&D. Later. Bye-bye. Okay, end this. Right, we'll get into the next one.